Congratulations if you've made it to this stage, because we're about taking a step further. We just learned how to sign up or how to register, and here are the codes for it. And we're about to go into how to sign up. So how then do we sign up into our database? So we're going to be creating a controller we're going to be creating a controller. So we're going to call this controller login. So let's export it, module dot exports. So the name of the controller is going to be called login. So it's going to be taking two methods, the REST and the requests and the response. And right here, I think what we'll just do is we'll make it a post request and we'll just do rest.send just to be sure that we have actually created this controller. So rest.send, what are we sending? We should just say posts or login. So let's just do that and go back to our route. So we save it, we go to our route to create our route for this login. Okay, so go straight to the route, create a login for the route here. So it's going to be router.post, and boom, we are good to go. And the parameter it will take is just /login. And the second parameter is definitely going to be the name of the controller we just created, which is login. So all fingers crossed, this should work on our Postman. So let's just quickly test this on our Postman. This is a post request going to log in, and we should see something, a response showing login. Login. So it means that everything went well. So now let's start putting in the logic of our login. So when you want to log in, what is that you're trying to do? Very simple. What you're actually trying to do is that you're trying to go into a database and you're trying to compare the data you're collecting from the user. You're comparing it with the database, with the record that you have on the database. If the username and the password are the same, then it means that the person passed, right? And if they are not, if one of them is not, then it means that the person fails. So that is just the concept of the login. And every other thing that comes in is secondary. So you can create cookies and the rest of them, which you're going to be doing later. But let's first of all handle that simple logic. So what are we going to do? In this case, we're just going to go back to our user login. So in the user login, we did rest.send here. Instead of rest.send, we're going to query the database to check for a particular record. So definitely we are getting record from the user. So we save that record in we are getting this from the front-end email, which the front-end developer is going to be telling us the name. So email, let's assume we've already had an agreement with the front-end developer that we're going to call it email. Then the data we're going to be getting from the password, the other is called password, right? So we have password. And all this is coming from request.body, right? So that is it. And here also, we're just going to write something very, very much more easy to see that if there is no data coming from request.body, because some user might just decide to go in and just hit the login button without any consideration. So we will not want that to happen. So we don't want the system to crash. So we want to write a little validation for that. That is, if the user goes in there and just hits the enter the login button without entering anything, she should be able to prompt the user that the user has just entered something. So this is what we're going to do. So we're going to say request.body. Now, request.body is what we're actually getting from the user. So we're going to say, and they are objects, right? We're going to say if objects.keys. Now, what is that keys that I want to create? The keys is the request.body, what we're getting from request.body. So if what we're getting from request.body, right, which is the body request.body itself, and then we put dot length, right? If it is less than 1, then it should throw an error. It should throw an error. So it should give us an error. It should tell us something. So we will just send something to the front end. The rest, the status, rest.json. I'll just say that. Um, 501. I want to see what we call bad request or empty request. I think that is 501. So I just have to confirm that again if it is 501. But it doesn't really matter. You can go on with it. Okay, the status is 400. So we're just going to say rest.status, which is 400. Now, even if you don't do this, you're still going to do that. But I just want us to start doing things in the right way. So the status actually means that this is a bad request, right? So .json, and we're just going to send this to them and say this is bad request. So we'll just put this in an object, an MSG, and we'll say bad request, bad request. Or we can just say empty fields. Empty feeds or feeds, as the case may be. So that's what we're actually sending to the front end if that happens. And if this doesn't happen, that is, if we do not have such a thing, then it should run everything here. So X, it should do this that we're about to do. Then it should get everything that we have in the request.body, right? So let's just write a little comment on this and say, if not JSON. Okay, so if not JSON, so I think I'm getting an error from here. The request.body .length showing me an error, and the F statement. Okay. Okay. I think I should use this if type of request.body. I think I did the wrong thing. This was supposed to be object key dot request dot body less than 1. We're not supposed to use the length. Let's just say less than 1. Okay. So let's see what that actually is, why we're getting such a problem. So if request.body.this is that, okay. Okay, so I think a little bit of a mess here. This is supposed to be request.key and it's supposed to end here, right? Yeah, that's the problem. So I didn't close up that bracket, then dot length. So what that means is that we want to check for the length of this, and so dot length if it is less than 1. So just this bracket alone. So if object.key.length that 1 is less than 1, then it should do this, else it should do the other way around. So let's check that again. If an object.request.key less than 1, and do this, dot length less than 1. So I'm still getting the same error. For reason best not to it, okay, let me just hover on the error and see what the problem is. Okay. Where is the if statement? See the problem? There's supposed to be an if statement. Oh, yeah, this is supposed to be inside the if statement, and the if statement was taken off. So if, right, we open the bracket. So that's going to be the condition. So we'll paste in that. So if this is this, less than this, then do this. Else, it's going to do the other way around. So everything is okay. That's just a schoolboy error anyway. Okay, so let's move on quickly. So what we're trying to do now, we are getting the data from the database. So we are not going to be doing much more validation here like we did the other time. So we're getting this. So what we're going to do first, we're going to check the database and see if this user name actually exists first. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to check the database to see if the user name actually exists. So let's first of all check for user. If user exists, check if user exists. So we've written that code before that quickly. I'm just going to copy it in one of our validations so that we don't waste time. Okay, if you come down here, you find the validation that we actually did here that we are trying to await to see if user already exists. So I will just copy this. So we can decide to write this again. So put this in a try and catch and do this. So it's exactly the same thing as this. So we want to try and see if the user actually exists. Or we can as well put that in a method so we don't, in programming, we try as much as possible not to repeat ourselves. But in this case, there's no big deal. We can decide to repeat ourselves. In this case, I don't think we will ever really need that again. So we want to check if user exists. So boom, this is what check for user exists. So we put a try catch. Then we're going to put this. So we're going to say if the user exists. So we'll say data don't await. As you can see, we're getting a problem error here because this is not an async. So we're going to add async right away. So with that, this will disappear. So it means that if this data exists, we're going to search by email. If it exists, then it's a good one. So if it exists now, if data exists, so it's going to be doing some stuff here. So if this data exists, a lot of code is going to be written. So I'm not just going to say if it exists, just throw these errors. We don't need all this anymore. So if it exists, it's just going to run this code for us. So if it exists, and then it's now qualified to be able to search for the password. Now it exists, right? Now, if it exists, it's qualified now to search for the password. So it now goes into the password and search for the password. But the question is, what if the data doesn't exist? What is it going to do? So it's going to throw some error, or it's going to tell it that password does not exist. So in this place, we're just going to create login error also quickly. And up here, we'll just say this is our, let's call it login error. So we say let's login error equal to, just be an empty string also. Just be an empty string also, because we're not really, you can also make it an array. So I think I will make this an array so we can learn, right? We don't just want to be doing things exactly the same way. Yeah, it's good to do that, but just for the purpose of learning. When you're developing, you can make it consistent. If you're using method, object, you can use object. If you're using an array, you can decide to use array. In this case, I want to use an array. I've taught you how to use object before now. So there is nothing in here. So we want a situation whereby if the user doesn't exist, so if there is data, something will go on. But if there is no data, what do we want it to do? So let's say if not data. So we're going to put not here. If not data, what do you want to do? X, if data. So this is when if it exists, if user exists. Now this one is when if user does not exist. So if user does not exist, what do you want it to do? Okay, so quickly, I wonder why I keep on making this mistake when I'm typing in the exist. So if user doesn't exist, so what exactly do you want it to do? So if user doesn't exist, we want it to send a message. We want it to add to the error. Then after adding to the error, we want it to send a message and say, send that message straight to the front end right away. That user doesn't exist. So we add that to the error. So let's quickly add that to the error. So we say errors. We call it login errors. Now, the method to put in an error is called push. That's to push something into an array. So this is just push method. So whatever you're pushing in here, now you can decide to push in objects. You can push in objects. But I think I'll just push in just normal string. So I'm just going to say username does not exist. Oh yeah, I'm going to say user wrong or invalid username. Invalid username. So we can just say that or username does not exist or this user does not exist. Whatever case, whatever thing you want to put in there is just English language. So we're going to say login.push. So we push that into the array. And what else are we going to do after pushing that into the array? Now, don't forget, what we're doing is that we can decide to also send this to the front end, rest.send. We can decide to send it. I think we should do that. So we should do rest.status, right, .json. The status, I think when something is not found is 404 or something like that. But everything went on where, so we'll say 200 because everything went on where, right? But the user does not exist, so we're just going to say .json, and boom, we go. So what are we sending it to? You will see password. You can say invalid password, just the way we did here. Just copy this that says invalid password and paste it here. So we're sending this to the front end. So that's what we're actually doing. So now, that is, if it doesn't exist, we'll send this to the front end. Now, if it exists now, what are we going to do? We'll now go into the database. We now know that this exists, right? We'll search from the database. Now, we want to search the database if it exists. The first thing we do is search the user data. So we search the database. So we're going to search the database. I don't think there's any need for that. So I'm explaining. So we're going to search for the database and see if such a user will fetch that user from the user. Is that okay? Because the user already exists. Now that user that already exists was stored in this variable called data, right? So if we check out what we're getting from data, we're going to be getting name, email, ID, password. That's what we're going to get from data. So we're going to be doing a comparison. So if it exists, let's just consult or log out the data first. So before we can proceed. So let's consult or log out the data. So what should the data be? Okay, the data, that's the data variable. So let's do that quick and just check that out. So the first thing now, I'll go in here. I'll come in and try to log in. Okay, this is the login, and here is my name, my password. So I want to log in, see a post request. So let's try that and see what we're going to get. Okay, instead of me logging it out, I will just do rest.send. I'll send it to the front end so we can see if such exists. So rest.send. So I'll run this now quickly. Let's see what it's giving us. Okay, couldn't send request. So there must be an error somewhere. So let's try to figure out that error. So I'll go to my terminal, time to debug, and see what that error is and where that error is coming from. Okay. Okay. This is it. I'm not seeing anything yet, but let me just try that again. So it's a post. Let's try that again. Yes, we go. Everything is going on well. As you can see, it has been printed out. This is the data, right? That means this user actually exists, right? So it's printed out the data. So the next thing that we want to do now is to compare the password with this. So I just want to put in something different here. Let's assume this one doesn't exist. Let me remove the E. This doesn't exist. So let's try the one that doesn't exist first and see if both are working. So it said invalid username. Is that okay? Or invalid email. I think I should just put invalid email instead of username. Should also change this. There's a trick you can use. You just use your Control D, then you change everything. Okay. So test again. So we get invalid email because that email does not exist. Okay, invalid email. So that's what we're getting. And if I put in the right one, just like this, I'm going to get something reasonable. So I'll get this, right? So I'm going to get this. So this is what's now, I've been able to fetch this now. This is what I will now compare. I'll now compare the password with this. And if the password is then it's going to tell us that this is what successful. So how do we get that? So quickly, if you see, we have an ID feed underscore full name feed underscore password feed. So the password feed is what we actually want to make use of. So we're going to compare that now. So very simple to do. So we're just going to say if, instead of doing rest.send here, we're just going to say if, right? If the user, that is the data that I collected, dot the password, right? That is the data printed out now. If it's equal to what the user is typing in, which is just the password, right? So it's going to print out something for us. Now, once it does this, then it's going to say successful. So maybe we can just do rest.send for now and say successful. But this is not going to work. I'll tell you why it's not going to work. So we're just going to send this to the front end and say successful. Now, this is not going to work. Even though we know that this is me that just logged in with Glare, and it's exactly the same password that I typed in. This was what I typed in, right? And this is what my database, what I have in the database, right? But what I have in the database has been turned into something else. I've been turned into a string. So it's going to compare this string directly. If I say if I use that direct equal to with this, as you can see, this password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is not the same as what you're seeing here. You can see there are different strings here. So this is where the concept of compare comes in. So I can't use this one to do so. So I'm going to be using what they call the bcrypt.compare. So we're going to be doing that in our next video. Hope to see you there. Thank you. If you have any question, please do not hesitate to send it to my mail. Bye for now.